Good evening. My name is Lukhanyo. My surname is Neer. I'm going to say a number of hard things today. I'm going to charge you to listen through and let me get towards the end. I am building a particular argument, and I would appreciate it if you were to listen through what I know are hard things. I'm also going to speak in generalizations. I'm going to say white people. I want to say all white people. I want to say all black people. I have no doubt that there are in this room, because you're all here interested in this conversation, that there are many good white people. The problem is not that they're good white people. The problem is that there's a structure that good white people live in, and the structure is anti-black people. This is why I'm going to speak in generalizations. I'm not going to say some white people, some black people. I'd initially said no to this, to speaking today. The reason I had said no, and even though I'm fully aware it's a group of Christians, even I'm fully aware that today's talk is in a church, I couldn't help but remember the incident of Charleston in the United States, where even a church is not a safe environment. I did eventually agree. You can ask me later on why I did agree. But I did agree. You can start at 10 minutes now. So at the famous Riverside Church in New York City, Dr. Alan Bussack, looking at the death of Abraham in Genesis 25, articulates a model for radical reconciliation. Bussack argues that in order for Ishmael to have been present at the funeral, Isaac would have needed to find and reconcile with him. He argues that Isaac must have recognized the mistakes made by his father Abraham and sought to make them right. Bussack tells us that Isaac must have recognized that it was not enough for him to simply have land and wealth when he was not reconciled to his brother. Using this, Dr. Bussack concludes his sermon by saying young white people cannot use the excuse of saying they did not cause the mess while they continue to benefit from it. He argues that it is on them to go out and find their brother, black people, and reconcile with them so that they can be blessed, as you see in Genesis 25, verse 11, you can do that for yourself. So off the back of the story, over the next 10 minutes, I will argue that reconciliation is not possible without relationship, and that relationship only comes from recognizing the humanity of the black other. First, I will describe that black people are people stripped of their humanity. Second, I will look at why black people telling their stories and experiences is not enough if their humanity is not recognized. Third, I will discuss the importance of black people being each other's mirrors and the need for them to hold each other accountable. Fourth, I will examine what it means to form a real, effective, and authentic relationship with a black person. And finally, I will reimagine the reconciliation project as we know it. You'll note I only have 10 minutes, it's possibly 8 now. That's why I'm reading this quickly. Firstly, black people are people stripped of their humanity. I believe anti-black racism stems out of the refusal to perceive black people as fully human, created in the image of God. It is not by chance that South Africa finds itself as a country of wailing mothers, angry youth, terrorized fathers, exploited women, marginalized families, and vulnerable communities. It is my view that the hate in South Africa is in fact a part of a continuum of structural exclusion and othering that has existed in Africa for centuries, and that it has simply continued linearly into post-colonial and post-apartheid South Africa. That hate has become endemic in South Africa has created a perfect environment for racism and its ugly sibling, xenophobia, to thrive in our society, often violently, and we have taken the abnormal, sadly, for the normal. As black people, and yes, I will speak on behalf of black people today. As black people, ours is a fight to be human in the face of a structure that denies our humanity. Anti-black racism presents whiteness as a normal mode of humanity, which leads to the demotion of the other, the black other, to subhuman and non-human levels. Blacks, Franz Fanon suggests, are not structurally regarded as human beings. He suggests they are treated as an object among other objects, stripped bare of any essential, to the point of inhabiting a zone of non-being. The zone of non-being strips black people of their humanity. The resistance to seeing and treating black people as fully human has resulted, Cornel West tells us, in a nation of people who are degraded and oppressed and hungry for identity, meaning, and self-worth. Black people are effectively deficient of God-given identity and robbed of all inalienable rights to be. Black people are effectively deficient. I've just read that, didn't I? We find that whiteness dictates the classification of blackness itself and the tolerance levels of its various expressions. Some accepted per convenience, others outlawed. Whiteness assumes the role of benefactor of God-given rights then, and blackness is at her mercy. Secondly, the telling of our stories and experiences is insufficient if we are not seen and treated as human beings. It's not by chance that my bio was deliberately thin. This particular section will speak to that. We should not have to earn our humanity. At the core of my argument lies the suggestion that anti-black racism continues not because of a lack of understanding or knowing of the stories of black people, but rather a refusal to see and treat black people as humans. And so, I should be treated better simply because I am human and not because you know my story and experiences. And then out of charity, you bestow upon me a measure meriting your association and even better, your fellowship. No amount of storytelling will stop racism if our humanity is not recognized. It is important to note then that we are not just interesting biographies and stories. Because what happens when you don't find my story compelling? Do you then refuse to see my humanity? Thirdly, you need to be each other's mirrors. We need a collective resistance against racial injustice. If it was whispered over dinner tables, was affirmed in men's clubs, articulated in university lecture halls, and codified as policy in government, in committee rooms of government, or platforms of whiteness, might I add, it need be there that it must be re-examined and challenged. I feel it important to stress that racist cultures and attitudes are sustained by entire social contexts. Lwandile Figeni writes, white culture in South Africa is defined and sustained by racism. Spatial racism, cultural racism, linguistic racism, economic racism, and every other form of racism imaginable. I believe white people are more likely to change if there is positive peer pressure at play because they want approval of other white people, their friends and family. White people need to create a culture that holds white people accountable and that challenges and stops others from being racist in their name, your name. When you say nothing, you are being complicit. Fourthly, so what does it mean to form a real, effective and authentic relationship with a black person? The foundation should never be that the person is black and that God told you to. Rather, this should be from the standpoint that they are human, just like you. Maybe I should say that it's good to listen to God. If God is saying be friends with a black person, do it, right? Humanity for the black community is not a scarce resource. Everyone not only demands humanity, but also deserves it. Relationship with black people does not only count with your inner circle, but seeing black people as humans goes even for the black people you consider purely functional, a tool and means to an end, and even those most detestable and repugnant in their ways. Not say that. Maybe I should. So I don't expect relationship today simply because you've heard me speaking today, right? And I think it's important that you don't only afford relationship to me because you've heard me tell you this, but you are willing to afford relationship to all black people because we all deserve relationship. Relationship and fellowship must be from a position of two standing equals submitting to one another without fear or favor, to share a meal and commune, no one usurping or abdicating any levers. Umtu abone omnye umtu qha. I'm not going to interpret that. Finally, there is a need to reimagine the reconciliation project as we know it. Because reconciliation is the foundation for a united South Africa, not the destination. We have used a fundamentally biblical concept to further benefit the privileged and further marginalize the already marginalized. Reconciliation, as seen in Luke 19 through Zacchaeus, is not possible without self-introspection and review, owning up and recompense. Throughout the Bible, God deals in both reconciliation and justice at play together. The best example of reconciliation and justice at play, for me, is seen on the cross. In order for us to be reconciled with God, Jesus had to pay the cost of our sin. In other words, justice. The act of the cross was not reconciliation in lieu of justice, but rather justice in order to be reconciled. We would not have been reconciled without the act of justice. So then when we speak about the need to reconcile as a people, then we need to speak about the need for justice. Is a reconciled South Africa a future reality to be hoped for, or a present reality to experience now? The small gains made since 1994 should be acknowledged. However, we should not mistake them for thinking we have solved our deeply entrenched race problems. So I'm a massive Game of Thrones fan, so I couldn't help but quote Tyrion. So in the last season, I think it's episode 8, where Tyrion says, "It's easy to confuse what is with what ought to be, especially when what is has worked out in your favor." Reconciliation in South Africa is both here and not yet. And if that sounds familiar, Paul speaks about kingdom being here and not yet. And I think that's the kind of approach we should take to reconciliation, and that we shouldn't take it as if it's an end, but rather the process of reconciliation is a process. We need to live as if we are fully reconciled, but also put in the work to make sure we are truly reconciled. As I pointed out over the last few minutes, the central issue when it comes to anti-black racism is a refusal to see and treat black people as human beings. Unless you begin to see all black people as human beings and build authentic relationships with them, you are not going to have the desired impact from these conversations, though they may be well-meaning. And that's why I didn't want to speak today, because I'm tired of having this conversation. I have this conversation at least twice a week. I have it at least twice a week, and the moment I walk away from the coffee shop from the dinner table I experience an act of racism. Last 2 paragraphs. 3. As the church, we have it in our power to change society. In fact, we are duty-bound to do so. The church must show Jesus in this painful and raw subject. I believe changing one element of the system, the church in this instance, will result in a change in all the other elements as well. If Christians do not model certain values and principles, they will not meaningfully persuade society. We will instead be disqualified and discredited with all the scorn we deserved by society. For we will be without the moral ground to speak with any moral authority. An ineffective church will not stop God from doing what needs to be done to ensure His kingdom comes on earth as it is in heaven. God will not wait for us to get it together. God will continue to move with or without us. Let's make sure it's with us. In closing, to borrow from one of my favorite authors, James Baldwin, it is up to us to end this racial nightmare and achieve our country and change the history of the world. Ngos.